Committee is called back to order. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased you're going to have a second round of questions and comments because I want to participate further than just this one brief 5 minutes. Clearly, there's inadequate supervision of this program and inadequate punishment when bad guys sin. We need to have a punishment that will discourage. You know, there's a $500 fine for riding in the HOV. Not very many people ride in the HOV because there's a huge punishment for that. We need to have a harsh punishment for this. You know, we're not going to do it, but if you hung the first person who did it, nobody else would ever do it, would they? And we need to have a punishment that just discourages people from doing it. These aren't stupid people. These are opportunists that are taking advantage of the system, and we need to encourage them not to do that. I'm very familiar with HUBZone program because the first HUBZone contract ever was in my district. It was Garrett Container in Garrett County. Don Morin runs it, great young entrepreneur. And they provide a lot of very good jobs. They're doing very important work for the government. But there's another one of my companies that I want to talk about, which I think is exemplary of what HUBZones ought to do, and this is Sycamore Associates. Great name. Who was a Bible character, went up a sycamore tree and came down, a Christian went up there, a heathen came down a Christian, so he's a very ethical person. He started in a little HUBZone in Frederick. It wasn't big enough. He had to grow. So he moved out to Garrett County. Garrett County, I have a county, 3 counties in Appalachia, 14% unemployment when I came to office, really Appalachia. And great business out there. His people out there get 3 times the average salary out there. And he pays his people out there 2/3 as much as he pays them. They do contract work for NSA, and SA is very fond of them. He pays his people out there 2/3 as much as he pays them in Howard County when they live near NSA. So he can now hire 3 people out there to do the same work that 2 people are doing in Howard County because it's just a whole lot cheaper place to use. So this is exemplary of what HUBZones ought to do. And I'm really angry that these people are abusing the system because every one of these cheaters takes money away from a great company like Sycamore Associates and Kurt Heckman, who runs that company, that are providing really good jobs and really uplifting the area. All of Garrett County is a HUBZone because they have, as I said, 14% unemployment when I came to office and very low salaries. His people make at least 3 times the average salary. So this is doing exactly what HUBZones are supposed to do. And does SBA not adequately manage this because you just don't have the resources?
Well, let me say first and foremost that I agree with you wholeheartedly that we should be about eradicating that bad element from the program, and we wholeheartedly agree that a lack of enforcement leads to further abuse, and we are approaching that issue from that perspective. We recognize, and I hope everyone understands, that we recognize the types of steps that need to be taken.
But you aren't taking that because you just don't have the resources?
I was going to finish. I was going to say, we recognize what needs to be done, and we know the proper oversight and the types of things we need to put in place. But we also recognize, and that's why we're going through this planning process, that it's going to add a substantial burden in terms of cost to how we conduct oversight over this program and the cost associated with doing that.
So it's partly our fault because we didn't give you the money to grow your staff so that you could have the staff. Now, my understanding is that the initial surveillance of this program is supposed to be self-policing. I know one small business person who is sitting in the audience here who's done a really great job of self-policing. He understood that that's what was expected. Nobody knows better who the cheater is than the good guy who lost because the winner was a cheater. And we expected that they would come forward as self-policing. That cost the taxpayer nothing. But I don't think we did a very good job of telling the HUBZone community that that's what we expected, did we?
No, and I'm not certain that it works very well in this environment. We find that while self-policing has worked in other programs that allow for self-certifications of a sort, we have found that more recently firms are afraid of offending contract officials by filing protests.
But see, that's our fault. We need to tell them that they're going to be applauded for filing a protest when it's a legitimate protest, not going to be punished for it. That we just didn't properly advertise that. We got to do one of 2 things. Either the community know that we really expect self-policing, and they're not going to be punished for it. They're going to be rewarded for it. And we have to give you enough money so you can police the program, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Dolkemper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank you for bringing this really important hearing before us today. As Mr. Bright said earlier, I'm a new member of Congress, and I've never been in elected office before. And I'm out there in the private sector running my business, and knowing that not everybody plays by the rules, but in my business we do, and thinking that, you know, the government, whether it's federal, state, local, is there protecting my interests, both as the business person and as a citizen, to make sure that those who are not playing by the rules are somehow punished for this, and that our taxpayer dollars are not being used fraudulently, as obviously they are. I have so many questions here, but I'm sure my outrage is felt by many others, including those businesses who are doing the right thing and who are using this program for the right reasons, who may end up losing that privilege to use this program because of those people who've been cheating. I guess my question, Mr. Kutz or Mr. Shear, do you have any idea how much money of the taxpayer dollars has been lost since we had the first hearing?
Well, there's at least $25 million that was awarded to some of the 10 contractors we identified last July, including one of the most egregious cases, got a $23 million award subsequent to the July 2008 hearing. So I would consider that to be additional fraud by those same companies.
And what percentage, I know you've kind of talked about this before, but you've only touched a few companies, and the percentage of fraud that you think might be going on within this program?
I don't know that. I mean, we did not necessarily randomly sample. We actually picked certain areas that were vulnerable to the principal office and the 35% rule, although we weren't looking for the other thing about the subcontracting. So 50+% of what we looked at so far, I don't believe that's the likely majority of the companies are not eligible. However, it appears that there's been no real oversight for quite some time, and I think we have an admitted self-certification process for the first X number of years of this program, and they're trying to move from self-certification now to actually putting a program in place, which is why you have difficulty going from advocacy to enforcement.
You know, I think that number would be very interesting, but it probably would be so scary. I'm not sure any of us would really want to. I think we'd want to know, but you know, I just sitting here listening, I just wonder what that figure is. You know, what that figure is over the course of this program. How much money of the taxpayer dollars has been fraudulently taken from us? I guess my concern, Mr. Hairston, as we go forward here, first of all, it's really become clear that the SBA did not do their due diligence from the last hearing to today. As we go forward, we also are looking at a fair amount of money going out from the recovery package to the SBA. And obviously, as a new member who voted for that package, who believes in that package, I'm very, very concerned about your ability, your agency's ability to monitor that money. Can you give me any reassurance about that?
Well, I think we are, in fact, doing our due diligence now as we go forward. We have done our due diligence on the cases that have been referred. We fully intend to aggressively do our due diligence on the cases that are being referred by the report that's released today. We expect that we will be meeting with the GAO and our IG and our general counsel within the next week or so to get the names of those companies so that we can start that process. And going forward, we will continue to implement procedures to further mitigate risk in the program. As I said before, we recognize that there's a huge risk here, and we also recognize that putting the proper protocols in place to address that will be an additional cost burden for this program, and we need to plan how we need to do that and what those resources really are.
And what kind of transparency are you going to have for us, for the American public?
For transparency for the American public in respect to, in terms of reporting?
I'd like to see transparency within this program, certainly as we go forward in terms of the recovery package, but I'd like to see some transparency so that we can...
That's something that we can certainly consider in this process, is how we can be very transparent in how we go about conducting ourselves in this matter.
Okay, I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett, you still have some questions?
After you. You wanted a
Sure,
second round.
I do. Yes, thank you. Mr. Kutz. Oh, sorry. Ms. Halverson. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have a couple questions, but first of all, I would like to follow up on what Congressman Bartlett's question was, and this is for Mr. Shear, Mr. Kutz. Do you believe that the SBA has the staff levels and the funding that's going to be required to implement some of the reforms that have been suggested? Because as I hear and I work with a lot of the different committees, I'm hearing the same things over. You know, we need help, we don't have enough funding, you know, we're doing what we can, you know, what's going on, and what is it that you suggest, and do we have enough staffing levels to do what we need to have done?
Well, I would say, I'll let Mr. Shear add too, but it's not just people. I think it's better processes and better use of technology. It's a combination of all three factors. And I've met with SBA officials in January for over an hour with their consultants to give them kind of a brain dump of the kinds of things that they should consider. But, you know, the kinds of processes we've talked about here are the random unannounced site visits, and they're still not doing those. And that's something that they should be able to do fairly quickly. We did 36 of those as part of this investigation ourselves with several people. So we did 36 ourselves. The technology issue is, do they have the kind of tools technology-wise to do some of the actual kinds of preliminary work that you would do before you actually go out and do a site visit, or to help you with your risk assessment? So our recommendations to them include all three elements of that.
Yes.
Mr. Kutz, I understand, Mr. Hairston, that the STV program was shut down, was closed, and that you moved 12 people from that program to the hub zone. So have you seen, and this happened when, last September,
Yes, I believe so.
did you see any progress regarding on-site visits or an acceleration of processes?
I can't answer on the program examination side. Apparently they've made progress on program examinations, but on site visits, if they've only done 7 this fiscal year, we did 36 for our investigation. So I don't think 7 is enough. And I don't know how many people they have at this point, but if they have 7 people, they should be able to do more than 1 a month, for example.
So, Mr. Hairston, I will give you more time, but it's just I cannot allow for this to go and not being able to ask you, what will it take? You know, this is taxpayers' money. And so with much less manpower, they have conducted many more visits. Yet you put 12 people added to the program, and still, what is the problem?
Well, I would assume first and foremost that from a manpower standpoint and from the standpoint of the prioritization of their resources, that's their job. That's what they do. That's what they're in business to do, is to go out and do that type of forensic investigation. In terms from our perspective, I don't know that the Hub Zone office set its priorities to support that type of an activity, and that's something that needs to be looked at, and that's something that needs to be corrected.
But aren't you concerned that this committee and the administration, that we're going to put pressure to close down this program?
Well, obviously, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the program.
And let me just, for the record, let me read you from the congressional hearing that we conducted last September. You came here, I asked you specifically about Ms. Carranza, the former administrator's commitment to do on-site visits. And you said, well, I'm not aware that she made such a commitment.
No, but I'm not
let
aware
me
of
read you. Let me read you what she said to this committee. In response to the findings of the GAO forensic investigation, which we learned about last week, I have taken immediate steps to require site visits for those Hub Zone firms that have received Hub Zone contracts. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just to reiterate, and I appreciate the conversation, I represent a district that probably could all use the Hub Zone funding. Low income, high poverty rate, high unemployment. Parts of my district have 14% unemployment rates. And I would hate to see that people that don't qualify get this kind of funding when we don't even have people in these towns that probably know even how to apply for this. So I'm going to work hard, my staff and I, to help them. And I just don't want to see that there are people who are abusing the system. And what I've found in my short amount of time in this body and 12 years prior in Illinois was, I think we have enough laws, we have enough programs, but we don't have enough funding and staff to enforce what we have. This is our life, and I would hope that you would take it seriously as we go back to do what it is that we all agreed to do, because the people are not benefiting. The wrong people are. So I would help wherever I can. I offer myself and my staff to make sure that whatever it is we're doing, we do it in the right way, because people like the people that live in my district in Illinois are suffering because they're not getting this kind of funding, and they're the ones that truly should, because in some parts of my district, they don't even have blacktop roads. They have gravel and sand and propane. They don't even have natural gas. So, you know what, I would really get frustrated if I knew that people in the wrong places were getting this kind of funding.
Yeah.
I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Kutz, last year, GAO's fraud investigators created 4 phantom companies, including 2 with mailboxes as a principal office and a 3rd with a Starbucks as the principal office. Are these 4 companies still listed as eligible HUBZone firms?
As of 8 a.m. this morning, yes.
Administrator Hairston, why was the SBA unable to even find the phony HUBZone firm at a Starbucks? And why weren't you able to?
Well, I'm sure if in fact those firms are in fact in the system now, that there is a process ongoing to remove them. There is a decertification process. I would hope that that process is underway. I can get that information back to you.
But
They're not being decertified. No, I mean, we would have gotten notice. I mean, we haven't heard anything from SBA at this point for those 4.
So.
But isn't this firm the same one that was found to be ineligible last July?
No, those are our 4 fake firms that we're talking about,
Yeah.
versus the one that actually got $23 million of new contracts. So, but no, our bogus firms are still in the system, although we haven't competed for contracts. We're not really willing to go that far with it at this point.
Yeah, and I would agree that they should not be there.
Really? 10 cases were brought to your attention last year. Only 2 have been officially removed from the program, and none have been debarred today. I have read your testimony and your explanation for this. Given the seriousness of the violations, why did the SBA not choose to suspend these companies during the debarment process?
Because we don't have the authority under our regulations to suspend prior to a formal action. Differing from our 8A program, under the regulations in our
Mr.
section
Shear,
8
is that correct?
No, that's not correct. You can
Mr.
suspend
Kutz?
a company before there's a prosecution and indictment if you have sufficient evidence. I mean,
And do you believe that there is sufficient evidence?
Well, I would I would actually disagree with that. I would disagree with that, and our council would disagree with that. We don't have the authority. It's not specific in our regulations that we could actually suspend prior to a formal determination. We can do that in the 8A program. We have specific requirements under our regulations in the 8A program that allow us to do that, to preclude a firm from receiving benefits for which it's not eligible. That's
I
a
want
flaw.
for your counsel to put that in writing for the record and send it to this committee.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just make for the record, I'm talking about suspensions, not debarments. Debarments require a much longer process, but suspensions can be done without as much evidence. I mean, if there's enough evidence in this case to decertify, our position would be that they could be
And
suspended.
we rely on our counsel who says
That they cannot be suspended?
that there is an evidentiary procedure and standard that has to be met, and that there's a due process afforded in that process. That's why I was explaining the difference between the authority we have under our 8A program that differs from the authority we have under our HUBZone program. But we will provide you what you're asking for.
Mr. Kutz, why do you believe that there have been so few referrals for either suspension or debarment?
As I mentioned before, because I think before you had more of a self-certification process, and so hopefully if they're putting more stringent front-end controls in place, they will identify more cases that actually they would refer to the IG and that they would consider for suspension and debarment. So hopefully if you move from an environment of self-certification to one where you've got effective controls in place, you will come up with more examples. And I would just say for the record, too, here, and I think Mr. Bartlett mentioned it, too, I think you have to make some examples of people. And if you don't make examples of some people here, you're not going to have any change. So here we are nearly a year later from our hearing last July, and we have little or nothing that's happened to the 10 cases before. And I would say some of those were egregious fraud cases that, again, I would say for the record, could have been suspended by now. We're talking about 6 or 8 months after the last hearing. The fact that nothing's been done with some of those companies and they're still getting government contracts as HubZone companies is not a good sign.
Any comments to that?
Oh, well,
quite a
out of the
statement,
10
sir.
cases that were referred, I think I indicated that we found 3 of those firms to be eligible. 2 of the firms were decertified.
What about the other 7?
I'm explaining that. 2 of the firms were decertified, 2 of the firms withdrew from the program, and 3 are actually still under investigation, and 7 have been referred for suspension and debarment.
Mr. Kutz, did you get any information regarding the 3 firms that SBA claim are eligible?
No, we've asked
that
for
effect?
information. The 3 cases were 3 cases, I believe, that they failed the 35%, not the principal office requirement. At the time we looked at them, we determined, based upon payroll records that we received, that they did not meet the 35%. SBA has represented that they now do, or at some point in time when they did the investigation, they did. We asked for support for all 3 of those cases about 2 months ago, and we've not received it yet.
Why is that?
I will find out. I don't know the answer to that. I wasn't aware that that request had been made, but I will find out why they haven't gotten the information.
Mr. Graves? Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you very much. Is the only punishment here debarment?
Actually, debarment, suspension and debarment is
That's the only punishment?
no. That's
what
a
else?
punishment. You actually the only other punishment would be decertification and then referral for some type of criminal prosecution.
Has that ever happened?
Not that I'm aware of.
You know, this
because-
reminds me of the illegal immigrants in the border.
I'm not aware.
If all
of
you
any
do is get
referral.
sent home, why not try again tomorrow? By and by, you'll be successful. If the only thing you do is debar them, you know, that's not punishment enough. Is it our fault that you don't have harsh enough punishment to dissuade these people?
No, I think there were cases that were referred for
But
criminal,
what is
but they were
the
denied.
What is the maximum punishment that could be meted out to these people? Can GAO tell us?
Well, certainly, these people all made false statements. Title 18, Section 1001, if you could get a U.S. attorney to take a case, you could prosecute a case in that particular situation. Now, the U.S. attorney declined the
They
cases
declined
that
the
Mr.
case.
Hairston's talking about here,
They have bigger fish to fry.
apparently.
Well, we've got to do something because
Mr.
this
Barlow,
just can't continue.
that is something the committee could decide to do, is work with some U.S. attorneys to see if they could get a few poster children cases to go through the criminal system. And that's something maybe you should consider that.
We had a few of those. It would stop this thing. This is such a valuable program. I just want to note again my personal experience with that. The first one in the country was Garrett Container out in Garrett County, 14% unemployment. They now have a lot of people working there doing a really good job, and they make shipping containers for our military. They're doing a doubly good job supporting the military and supporting the economy there. And then when Sycamore Associates went out there, wow, that really was revolutionary because they have a number of people there making 3 times the mean average salary there. But they're paying them only 2/3 as much as they would need to pay them if they were. And by the way, they give them a choice. They have a job for them in Howard County for $100,000, or a job for them for $65,000 or $70,000 in Garrett County. They take the job in Garrett County because the truth is you'll live better in Garrett County with $65,000 than you will in Howard County for $100,000. And so we're saving now. NSA can have 3 analysts, where before they could only have 2 analysts. So this is really, really good for my district, for Garrett County, because they're paying them 3 times as much as the average person works there. Look at all of the people down the line that are better off because of that. All of the industries that serve them, the service station, the cleaners, the drugstore, the restaurant they go to, and so forth, all of that there. And we're really saving the taxpayer a lot of money because now, and GSA is very fond of this because now they get 3 employees, where before they could only support 2 employees. So this is a great example of what these HubZone companies ought to be doing. And I'm just incensed, Madam Chairman, that we have these cheaters out there. And I know one of our small business people who is here in the audience who has been very successful in protesting. He knew that's what he was supposed to do. And he had one person that was awarded the contract. He had absolutely no capability. All he had was a townhouse. And obviously you protest that. He couldn't possibly have performed on it. But he was awarded the contract anyhow by this government agency. So our small business person protested that, and the protest was upheld. Then there was a second one, and he protested that, and that was upheld. So the system does work, but these small business people don't know that that's what they're supposed to do. So we now have all these egregious cheaters out there. And we need to do a couple of things. Either we need to let the community know that they're supposed to self-police, or we need to give you enough resources so you can police them. And we sure as heck ought to have a punishment that fits the crime so that they're dissuaded from doing it. And we've done none of that. Madam Chairman, almost a year ago we sat here, and here we are today. And it sounds like, Groundhog Day all over again. It's the same kind of thing that we were hearing a year ago. We need to give you more money. We need to tell the community they need to self-police. And we really need to have an adequate punishment. We need to have a few examples out there say it won't do it. Any argument that we need to do those things?
No, again, I think that as you said, I believe that if you have some examples out there of serious punishment, that will send a message.
Yeah, some jail time.
Yes.
That gets around very quickly, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. The people who are now offenders, they knew that there wasn't going to be much. It needs to be people that come in and offend from now on. You can't really. That's ex post facto, and it's unconstitutional. And the general knowledge was that there wasn't going to be any serious punishment for this. So huge gain possible. So why not do it? We need to make that very non-productive for them, don't we? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Brave. No.
How often does a business have to recertify if they're in a hub zone?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
Yes.
Can't you just withhold certification too if they turn out to be, fraudulent?
Or if they during the recertification process, they can
But
be
you'd have to
recertified.
check them to do that.
I'm sorry.
You'd have to actually go check and see if they're the real deal.
We're supposed to, yes.
Congressman, could I also add to that? I mean, in addition to recertifying for Hub Zone, they also recertify certain key facts in
Right.
online annually. And so when I mentioned in my opening statement that many of these companies, all 19 had made recent false statements, they all certified that they were Hub Zone eligible during periods that we determined that they were not. Not to SBA, but as part of an online overall contracting certification program.
Mr. Bartlett, I just would like to remind the committee that we passed the Hub Zone reform through the House with overwhelming support. So we're just not here waiting for SBA to do what they are not doing. Let me state.
Madam Chair, did we give them the resources? Giving them the responsibility without
Well, the committee
resources?
passed a budget, and we are providing the resources.
They're telling
Yes.
me they don't have the resources.
No, in the budget that we passed here, and the committee reported out. But don't forget, for the last 8 years, yes, their budget has been cut by almost 40%. We are trying to restore some of the money.
We can't fault them for what's our fault. If we gave them the responsibility and not the resources.
Well, it's a new
our
day in
fault, not theirs.
Washington. Mr. Hairston, let me just say this. I am extremely, extremely disappointed for the lack of progress. And my message to SBA is clear. You have a decision to make, whether or not you are committed to this program. And then the committee has a decision to make regarding the future of the program. With that, let me ask unanimous consent that members will have 5 days to submit a statement and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.
Is that your first one? What's that? Is that your first one? That's the first one. Good. This is yours, right? Yes.